Right, welcome back, and thanks very much for staying with SABC Channel 404. I'm Flora Dover coming to you live from Studio 11. All right, so I guess the big story then coming out of today is that the IEC is calling in auditors to verify the vote after receiving several complaints of vote rigging. And of course, you would have seen some of the smaller parties really quite upset about that and accusing the IEC of corruption. I don't suppose that the IEC is very happy about that. Let me take you to The Rock in Pretoria, Results Operations Centre, where it's Piso Makwetla and, of course, my colleagues in Pumngongane are standing by to give you the latest and up-to-date information of what's happening there with the votes.
Thanks a lot, Flo, and a very good evening to you and to our viewers. Once again, we are indeed live from the Pretoria IEC Results Operations Centre. As you can see in the background, the leaderboard on, and zooming in here to our touch screen, you will see the latest results, the race for seats showing that as of, 66.15% of the votes counted. That's over 15 million, or rather 15,164, 222,925 polling stations. The ANC has 56.7% in the lead. DA at 22.52%, 9.84% the EFF. And if I can just move the screen up a bit, as you can see, the Freedom Front Plus at 2.60%, right behind the IFP. For some, that has been a huge surprise. Some saying that they would have expected the UDM, which you can see here at about 8th position, at 0.54% support, to discuss some of these results and what could possibly be the reason behind that. Professor Somadoda Fikeni, our resident analyst this evening. Let's just first start with this. The predictions, some are saying, those who are on the conservative side are saying this is exactly what they had in mind. ANC 56.7%, meaning that if it really is a jump, it will reach 60% just about. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I do think that it is one expected in terms of many projections, but it is equally surprising that a party that has so many problems, from the State Capture Commission, revelations around some of its leaders, the economy not doing well, the divisions within the party, at the time when one thought it was at its most vulnerable, there seemed to be no dramatic shift where the opposition parties would be taking advantage of that. Reason being, ANC's weaknesses do not translate automatically into opposition strength. Hence, we were talking about the DA's own internal challenges, but also the turnout issue here, where some people thought that parties like the EFF, with such energetic crowd in the stadiums, in the
I
social
see just
media,
even on some of the tweets saying that the EFF strength was purely on the social media space. But I want to talk about not only the projections of the media, Prof, and the pundits who were saying that there is going to be not only a weakened ANC, a strengthened EFF in some cases, a very present ATM, which seems to be borne out by these stats. But more importantly, when we look at those predictions versus the science of the IEC and its system, which is in question at the moment, how should we see the situation now? Is it concern that the predictions that the ANC would have lost votes at the polls starting to show?
Well, I do think that if you go back to 2004 to the present, there's been a progressive decline of the ANC, losing about 4 to 5% in each election. And this outcome is in keeping with that. And it was just the dramatic fall in the urban areas in 2014 as well as 2016 local government elections that we were seeing. But given its crisis and its internal challenges, people thought it would actually be a rupture. That's now that it is holding on the upper side of 55, is in itself something that will come as a consolation.
Prof, let me just get straight to the crux of it, because clearly a lot of tension here. The smaller party is accusing the governing party of rigging the votes. There are those who are making all kinds of allegations that it's because of the fissures within that we've seen the shenanigans that have played out, that of double voting. It's supposed to take it. What is the reality of the situation? Because people do tend to hang on to those predictions and take them for a fact, especially, as you said, if there's been consistency in their predictions in the past.
Here, what you are seeing in comparative terms, you go back to 1994 elections, and the irregularities that were spotted then, and even the accusation and counter-accusation of elections being stolen, especially between the ANC and the IFP in KZN. The situation was worse then. The previous elections, where some boxes were found in some places. So in this particular case, I think it is the fact that smaller parties which have multiplied, nullifying each other's strength, might be so aggrieved even by the slightest signal of irregularities,
which we saw play out on the podium earlier on.
Even if in comparative terms to what we've accepted in the past, may not be such a big factor. Yes, that does not take away from the IEC having to improve on its systems.
Okay, I want us to get to the credibility of its systems in just a moment, and the failures or weaknesses we've seen in past elections. Again, I'll come back to, is it significant that the most number of arrests that have been made with regards to allegations of attempted fraud or instances of fraud come out of KwaZulu-Natal, given the various conspiracy theories, conjecture that was made ahead of these elections and the standing or strength of the ANC?
Well, I do think that it is quite significant that it's coming from KZN, as much as the issue of political killings within the ruling party and across political parties in KZN has become a significant feature. Therefore, it might need a very special attention that you find some of these. Yes, the numbers may not be massive, but that you do have these particular trends.
What would you consider as significant in the numbers that are found to have been meddled with? The IEC saying earlier on that it's undertaking an audit, so the sample size will be able to tell how widespread the practice is. 1% or less, would that be enough to call for a rerun of elections, as some are speculating here?
I doubt that 1% of any irregularity. Of course, 1% is quite significant in itself. But if that 1% was systematic expression, it would call for a rerun. But if you have something like 1% concentrated in a particular area, then that particular area, the recounting, the reviewing of the systems might be that it would be unprecedented that you do have a small sample and then you say rerun the entire system.
Let's go to the integrity of the system. You mentioned earlier on that there have been problems with the IEC system. I think there's an impression by some that elections are always 100% correct. Now let's talk about Section 27A of the Electoral Act, which is what the IEC spoke about earlier on. And they said they cause large-scale complications of distributions and logistics, this issue that people can go anywhere to vote for the... Is it indicative of greater problems, or is it just something that could mean that there is a kink in the system that could be overcome and negotiated after these elections?
Well, I do think that the latter is the case. it suggests that there are certain, loopholes in the system that need to be refined, that need to be taken care of. For example, the indelible ink may suggest that the procurement with the company where they procured was problematic. But you'd have to go one step further to say, because of this ink, here is evidence of people who went on massive numbers to re-vote again.
You mentioned that in 1994 there were even court processes, as stories coming out of here that there could be court challenges. Would they be on a similar scale? Should South Africans feel alarmed that there are questions being raised now?
Nothing at this stage suggests something on that massive scale. That's why I'm saying the onus might be on those who are raising the issues, besides the sampling that IEC has undertaken to do, to say, here is the evidence. In this voting station, in that voting station, is so massive that it would have tilted the scales in one form or another, or it would have reduced the election outcome. Remember, the international standard is that the elections should be free, fair, and credible.
And how you define that is a whole other issue in legalese. And of course, the standard is not the same in other constitutions in the world. We'll unpack some of those issues and others. Of course, look at other provinces, looking at that leaderboard. How is that progressing? The counting, it is expected by some that by midnight, the Eastern Cape will have a much, much clearer picture, which will tell us who really has taken over power there in terms of the greater majority. We'll be back here at the Results Operations Center. Flo, it's back to you.